Hello, I'm Karen from Kelly's Creations. I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful vibrant table runner today. First, you're going to set out your table with bubble wrap underneath and a piece of plastic on top. Then you're going to actually have a piece of cheesecloth which will allow the wool to migrate through it. This is instead of using silk. I'm going to choose my various wools. I'm going to have around about 16 grams of my main colour, about 12 grams of my accent colour, and then my second accent colour, about 6 grams, and then a few pieces of various decorations. First, shingle your wool over all of the edges. I've chosen 2 different accent colours here for the edge of my scarf, and then my other wool over the main body of the scarf. I've done this diagonally as I like the scarf to have a diagonal stretch to it when it's finished to give it a slightly different colour. Then you can put on your decorations. Here I've got various mohair boucle wools and some bright red vicos to give it a bit of sparkle. And I've also put various strands of Angelina in it. So any pattern you like. The diagonal shingling will give it a various, rather than a sort of, it'll give it a stretch rather than a square rectangular feel. Here we go, you can see the decoration in detail here. Some lovely little bits of sparkle of Angelina. Then covering it over in a net, and then we're going to wet out. You don't have to have one large piece of net, you can overlap various small pieces if you don't have it. Then get your nice warm soapy water. It doesn't have to be too hot. Then basically wet out your fabric. What you're trying to do is push out the air in the wool through wetting it and then squeezing it down with your hands. It takes quite a while to do this, so don't underestimate, because you need to get a decent amount of water in there. Do cover your floor underneath if you don't want anything wandering off your table and making a mess. You can also use a flat sponge to push the water into the wool. What you're trying to do is force the water all the way through the wool, take out any air gaps. You won't be able to felt unless the wool is relatively wet. Going to just make sure that's fine. And then once you've done that, you've got it very wet, then you're going to put more soap. Use a nice olive oil soap bar and basically rub that into the felt. You're going to do this all the way along. You want to make sure it's lovely and soapy so that when you're sanding it and rubbing it in a moment and rolling it, you can make sure it's got plenty of soap which will help agitate the fibres. Just going to have a look at the edge here just to sort of see if there's enough soap in it. Also going to look at one method of making a straight edge. This is not what I've chosen to do, but here's just a small example. You can fold over at this stage the various overhanging wool on the edge of the cheesecloth and fold it over and get a reasonably straight line. I did start off on this piece doing that, but then I found that I needed to trim it, as you'll see later on in the video, and fold it even more because it didn't seem to adhere on the very edges. Sometimes you do all of your work on the main body and don't spend enough time felting the edges of your work. It's quite important. If you look at this, I'm just folding this over, tapping it down, getting it around the cheesecloth so I get a nice sort of smooth edge. This is one way to do it, as I said. Later on you'll see the second way, which is me trimming the edges. In a few minutes you're going to see me sanding the work, which is taking some of the effort out of rolling to get the first stage of felting underway. I'm going to use a cordless electric sander, which you'll see in just a few seconds. It makes quite a noise, that's why I've taken the noisy off of this and done an over dub of the video. You're going to sand it all the way over. You'll see me moving the sander here, but that's just to get it smooth through. What you do need to do is make sure you put the sander on the same spot for at least 10 seconds and then move it along to the next spot and all the way on along from the top to the bottom. This can take quite a long time, but it's well worth it as it helps to get the felt really strong and force the soap through the wool start felting it. Got a very thin piece of work here, obviously only one main sort of layer, so you do need to get quite heavy with your pressure. Once you've done that, you can then cover it with some plastic and begin to roll it. I've also rolled including the bubble wrap, and then you would basically let all the water out of the end of the roll, cover it in a nice towel, and then you're going to roll it. You're going to roll it quite a lot of times, a couple of hundred times. You won't see all of that here, but to roll your felt, so that's why it's important to get a decent sanding over the beginning. It does cut down the rolling somewhat, but you want at least a couple of hundred rolls, and then you're going to undo it, and then you're going to roll it up from the other end, and then you're going to continue to roll. You can see that I've tied the towel here to stop it slipping. I don't always do that, as you'll see from the next clip. You'll find the towel gets quite wet as the water's forced out of it when you're rolling it. The rolling agitates the wool, really starts to felt fibres together. You're at the very early stage of the felting process here. I'm unrolling it now. It's still got its plastic on it and its bubble wrap and the work in between. And then I'm going to take my roller and put it up to the other end. I'm using a solid icing roller here, used for creating icing for cakes. It's really heavy and it's really good, but you can use a wooden roller if you have it, or any foam piping. The heavier the rolling implement, the firmer the pressure and the easier the felting will be. So I'm rolling up from the other end here, so that trying to keep it even. You find the bubble wrap bubbles a little bit, and you just have to sort of stretch it out as you go. Again, covering it over my towel. It's still quite wet at this point, so this helps to soak up some of the moisture as it's squeezed out. Continue to rub this quite a lot. About halfway through the video. If you're getting bored by now, please stick with it. It's worthwhile. You can speed these things up, but then you lose a lot of the detail. So I prefer to show you the whole process, although the whole process did not take 15 minutes, which is the length of this video. So you can see I'm using my forearms here to take a little bit of the effort out of it. Be very careful with your back when you're rolling. Put your feet apart, stick your bottom out, curve your back, do it in little sessions and have a little stop. Again, this isn't showing you all of the rolling, but you want to go perhaps a couple of hundred times at least on the second set of rolling. Then you're going to see that this is where I have trimmed up my edge. So I've unrolled it and I've realised my edge is quite raggy. So I'm trimming off the cheesecloth and the various bits of wool that are overhanging, because I want a reasonably smooth edge. These are handmade and they're not going to be perfect. And I've clipped all that off, and then what I'm going to do is, that's got rid of all the raggedy bits of wool, then I'm just going to fold over the edge with the material and then fold it back over on itself. It's a bit fiddly, but it's worthwhile because it gives a nice clean area. You can wait till it's completely dry and then trim it, but you will find it's a little bit open then and it's likely to fray. So it's better to do it before you finish felting. Get all your edges properly felted over rather than cut raw. So you can see the cheesecloth just being folded over there a bit. This is on the underside of the work. And then I'm just folding over the very edge again to get my clean edge. So I've folded in about 2 inches, then I'm folding over about another 3/4 of an inch the other way to give myself a nice edge, and then I'll pull it back out flat so that all the raggedy bits go on the underside of the work. Just tapping that down. You'll see in a minute I've run my sander up the edges to really firm this up. You have to keep wiping your hands, so have yourself a nice tea towel around, and then I'm just running the sander down the side. Get this flat. Take a little bit of time, but it's worth it because it'll give you a neat edge to your work when you're finished. This particular design, doing the shingling on a diagonal, will give a pointy end to each end of the table runner, as I wanted it to look a little bit arty on the table rather than a nice clean rectangle. From start to finish, you probably need to allow about 2 hours to make one of these. I've speeded it up and cut out various little duplicate sections here. Then I'm folding it back over again. Now it's neat. And I will have done the other side exactly the same, which you won't see here. Again, going down with the edging of the sander. Because when you're rolling, you put most of the pressure in the middle of the work. So it's important to sand the edges if you've got a sander. If not, you just have to concentrate on hand rubbing the edges and making sure you roll all the way across. Making a table runner like this is not for a beginner felter. You should probably do some small flat felting pieces. Have a look at my other videos first, and then when you're a little bit more accomplished, then you can move on to a slightly bigger project like this. Right, now I've taken out the bubble wrap and I've rolled it just in the plastic around the icing roller. Haven't bothered with the towel now because a lot of the water has been squeezed out of the work as I've been rolling. And I'm going to do, surprisingly, at least probably another 50 rolls each way, concentrating on small, tight little movements. The best way really to find out how many rolls you need to do is to practice. Do one. Don't expect your first scarf or table runner to come out perfect, but it does give you a lot of information and you will learn a lot from the very first one you do. Mine wasn't brilliant, my first one, but I've got better and better at it and learnt to use various different techniques, including the sander, etc., and lots of patience, basically. Keep rolling. When you get to the end of the rolling stage, do the pinch test, see that you think that it's well felted, and then you can move on to the fulling stage. I'm about to do that. I'm going to unroll this, and then I'm going to rinse my work in hot and then cold water. And when it's completely squeezed out, I'm rolling it back in, no plastic now, in my bamboo matting, which will help agitate quite roughly the wool and full it. Now the fulling stage will firm up the felt, and it will also start to shrink it. Now it'll shrink the way that you're rolling, and you can only really roll this table runner from one end to the other, so you're rolling on the vertical, so you're really only going to affect the length when you're filling it like this. What I did when I was finished doing that, I also popped it into the washing machine for a 15-minute cycle, very quickly with a spin, and this actually brought it much tighter together, and you'll see the difference in the finished article and even at the end of this fulling stage. The actual washing machine can be quite useful to felters, but you do have to realise you get very uneven results, and I certainly wouldn't suggest it for a scarf. You might have a very unusual shape. With this, I didn't really mind. So you can see this is about 18 inches wide. After I put it in the washing machine, it's come down to about 12 inches and also affected the lengths. It's come down to about 4 foot from 6 foot. You can also basically bash it away on the table to reduce it. Here you can see the final result. Now this has been put in the washing machine, so the edges have gone very wavy again, but they are quite clean. They're not raggy scraps on them. Lovely little bits of silk and Angelina are showing up. It's got lots of sparkle. I'm intending using this around about Christmas or for any sort of Christmas parties I've got to jazz up my table a little bit. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you do, please subscribe to my channel and put a like. This helps me to promote more videos and allow them to be free to everybody. Really pleased got to the end of this video. Editing is not fun, but I hope you've had a good time. Thank you.